Hi, Millie. Thanks for being here. We're giving a few more minutes for people to join in. Do you want to check your mic? We are recording now. Do you want to just check your mic and make sure that it works?
The work?
Yes, thank
Okay.
you. Okay, we're going to get started in just a couple minutes, and thanks to everybody for being here. Um, we'll give about 4 or 5 more minutes to get a few more attendees before we kick off our town hall. We are currently recording. For folks joining us, we're just giving another minute or two before we kick off our town hall. We currently are recording and we'll get started in maybe just 2 more minutes. Thanks for your patience and thanks for being here. Okay. All right. Well, it is 6:35. I think we should start the meeting. Do you think so, Commissioner Terry?
Yes, let's go ahead and start.
Great. Okay. Good evening, everyone. Today is Monday, October 21st, 2024. And I want to thank you for joining our virtual town hall meeting today to hear the report back on the themes and recommendations that emerged from our September 5th listening session. The listening session brought together people from community-based organizations currently or recently providing programs inside of probation's detention facilities. My name is Dr. Sarah Gongora, and I'm one of the project directors for the Probation Oversight Commission. Commissioner Diane Terry will be giving a short presentation tonight focused on what we learned at the listening session and the recommendations stemming from the session, which will be published very soon in a public report. But the main point of today is really to hear from all of you. We'll leave most of the time tonight for your questions and comments. So as we get started, I'd first like to thank the many providers who participated in the listening session, all of whom expressed a lot of love for their work and the young people they serve, and really wanting them to have the opportunities for learning and reflection, mentorship, and safety. I really, truly appreciate the bravery it takes for people to speak their truth and to advocate for others. And I'm really thankful that this community lifts its voice to share what has been working and where opportunities exist to do better. I'm going to get us started tonight by sharing some information about today's meeting and how to participate, and then we'll jump right into our presentation. So our virtual town hall is being recorded and broadcast live tonight on our YouTube page, but we will not be engaging with any viewers there. You can follow our social media accounts on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Threads at LA County POC for more information about our meetings or to view recordings. And we also encourage you to invite others to attend. Tonight's town hall is not governed by the Brown Act, as we do not have a quorum of commissioners here in their official roles, so no actions will be taken today. We encourage participation, and again, we'll leave lots of time for comments. If you decide you don't want to comment out loud today, you can always send us an email at info@poc.lacounty.gov. After the presentation, we will open the floor to the public for comments and questions. Depending on how many people wish to comment, we may, I don't actually think, let me see, how many participants do we have right now? I don't actually think we're going to need to limit the time. So we're going to really just depend on everybody to share the time, and we'll talk about those guidelines in a second. So unlike in our regular public meetings, if you have a question or rather than a public comment, we'll give some opportunity to our panelists to answer the question if they wish. And if you have somebody you'd specifically like to pose your question to, you can feel free to do that at the beginning of your time. If you want to provide a public comment, what you will do is use the raise your hand feature by tapping the hand icon, and we'll add you to the queue. If you have called in, please press *3 to get in the queue. Then you'll be unmuted when it's your turn so you can ask your question. Again, if your question is for a specific panelist, you can feel free to state that. And you can also always send us an email to info@poc.lacounty.gov, and we will forward your questions and comments to the panelists for a response if you request one. Please don't send your public comments in the chat. I'm going to also do this in Spanish in case we have anybody joining us who prefers it and would like to make their comment in Spanish today. So, buenas tardes y bienvenidos todos. La prioridad de esta reunión es para escuchar sus comentarios sobre los resultados y recomendaciones de una sesión de escuchar que tuvimos con los proveedores de servicios en los centros de detención juvenil aquí en el condado de Los Ángeles. Ya se ha iniciado la conferencia por Webex y si le gustaría hacer un comentario o pregunta, por favor haga clic en la imagen de la mano y le llamaré cuando sea su turno. Si está escuchando la conferencia por teléfono y quiere hacer un comentario, por favor presione *3 y le ayudaré cuando sea su turno. Si está viendo la conferencia en vivo por YouTube y ha escrito un comentario o pregunta, por favor entiende que estos mensajes no están incluidos en el registro público. Si usted tiene una pregunta para un panelista específico, por favor indique eso al comienzo de su pregunta. Si usted decide que prefería entregar un comentario escrito, siempre puede mandarlo a info@poc.lacounty.gov. Gracias. We're going to ask everyone tonight to please abide by the following communication guidelines during today's meetings. If you can start your comment by introducing yourself with your name. Please share your thoughts and be respectful of the time so as many people can speak as possible. Please remain respectful. Any demeaning or abusive statements toward anyone will not be tolerated in this space. Please honor equity and participation of all. Please practice grace and openness with each other's experiences. And please use I statements. Speak your own truth and your own experiences. Okay, Commissioner Terry, I will now turn it over to you.
Thank you, Sarah. Before I begin, I did want to take a moment to introduce Commissioner Kakani, and just maybe if you could start us off by sharing any takeaways, impressions from the listening session. Commissioner Kakani helped to facilitate one of the breakout groups, and so just wanted to give you space to speak before I get started.
I'm just really quite grateful for the folks who stepped into that space and were really willing to be so vulnerable about their experiences, their access to young people, challenges that they were facing in order to ensure that young people were the best supported that they could possibly be in a carceral facility. And there's a lot of work to be done. Things are quite terrible in our juvenile hall, as we're all aware that they've been deemed unsuitable for the confinement of young people. And I do think that like the folks providing programming are like a real glimmer of hope for young people. So anything that like we can do to ensure that more young folks have more meaningful, more consistent access to these folks who are making the choice to go inside and engage with these young people. It's really incumbent upon us to share what we've learned and hold the probation department accountable to ensure that more folks can have access to our young people. So just a lot of gratitude for all of the folks providing programming in these facilities and bearing witness to the humanity of our young people who are inside there.
Thank you so much. Those are great words to start us off tonight. As you all know, understanding that the relationships between the probation department and all of the CBO providers who are offering services has been an ongoing issue of concern to the POC. And our ad hoc committee was really formed in response to the persistent questions and concerns that we've received about the challenges that folks are having trying to deliver programming. And so we created the ad hoc committee really with the goal of just trying to understand what are the specific experiences that CBOs have had at every stage, all the way from just starting and getting into the facilities and then all the way to actually providing services. And then also just trying to understand what is the department's long-term vision for programming. And so before we get into the specific findings related to these areas, I want to emphasize that we know that there are serious staffing and safety concerns. Many folks have brought up youth behavioral concerns, and we know that impacts programming. We know that there have to be enough staff showing up to help programs run smoothly. And we know that in order to really support CBOs, staff have to feel safe when they show up to work. However, we also we don't believe, however, that we should wait for youth behavior to change and then we think about programming. We also don't think that we should wait for staffing to increase and then we think about how to strengthen programming. We firmly believe that high quality and consistent programming that give young people hope, purpose, and concrete skills can help address the root causes that are contributing to some of the behavioral concerns happening right now in the facilities. So in other words, programming isn't something extra. It's a standard of care that all youth should be able to access, and it's critical for achieving the outcomes that I think we all want to see for our youth. So just wanted to start the conversation off by sharing that. And we can go to the next slide. I want to share an activity that we did with the CBO providers at the start of the listening session. And we asked everyone to share words that come to mind when they think about the youth who they work with. And on your screen, you see some of the words that came to mind for people. So folks were saying, the young people we work with, they're our future. They're our workforce. They have untapped potential. They're strong, they're wise, and their survivors. And I could go on and on with the words that you're seeing on your screen. But again, they're a reminder of who someone is and who they can be when they have access to relationships, to supports, and to the resources that they need. So in terms of emerging themes, I do want to share, and you can go to the next slide. I'll start off by saying that the CBOs did identify specific areas where improvements are needed, but I also want to highlight that many spoke positively about probation staff. They reiterated that they know that staff are working hard and are experiencing various stressors. And they also gave a lot of praise for improvements that had happened within specific facilities. And so some of the recommendations that the POC is making are really building on things that appear to be working well, that probation might already be doing. So we're offering 18 recommendations in total based on what emerged from the listening session. And I won't read all 18 tonight, but what I will do is I'll share some examples of the themes that emerged within each category. And then I'll highlight just a couple of the recommendations that could help address those concerns. So again, there's about 6 broad categories of themes that came out, and we've combined them a little bit for tonight's meeting. But I will share some examples for each one. And I'm going to start with clearances and contracts. So our main finding here was that the contracting and clearance process, it remains a mystery to providers and often to the POC. The lack of transparency and unclear communication about clearance approvals, denials, expirations, it's a barrier to not only services, but also to relationships between probation and the provider community. So just some examples I'll share here is, some groups talked about that it's a really smooth process that they had in terms of getting cleared to enter the facilities. Those who did have really smooth processes, I would say it's because there was a point person they were working with within the facility. However, others talked about inconsistencies in wait times and how long it took individuals to get cleared, and also in the expiration dates themselves. So as you can see on the screen, we have about 5 recommendations in this area, and I'll highlight just a couple that seem very straightforward and doable. So if you look at recommendation number 1, I mean, at a basic level, we're saying that the processes to get a contract or provide services in probation facilities should be made available in writing, and there should be enough detail that folks know what to expect. You should be able to know the timeline, all the steps in the process, and there should be a list of charges available that will result in an automatic disqualification. I'll also highlight recommendation number 5, which is that people need timely notification of expiration of their clearances. So probation should know that some people talked about there being, weeks or months where kind of their status might be in limbo, or the amount of time it takes to get cleared. So if your clearance expires, someone has to then restart that cycle. You have to wait to get cleared again. Then you have to wait for everyone in the organization to get cleared. And in that time, services aren't happening. So there should be timely reminders about when your clearance is going to expire. So our next topic had to do with data management. And really, this is pretty straightforward, which is that when you're using loose leaf paper as a tracking system for clearances, it's gonna inevitably lead to mistakes. So for example, some organizations shared, we often have to update probation on who's been cleared from our organizations, or sometimes probation can't find the clearances. Everything's on paper, there's nothing electronic, so it just leads to challenges. So our 2 recommendations in this area are very straightforward, and I will read the first one, which is, having facility-specific administrators who are in charge of programming, having there be an electronic process in which data for all individuals who are cleared to enter facilities having that be centrally managed, dispersed, and emailed as needed. And so every facility should have a way to access the information easily about who's cleared to provide services. And even if a specific contact person is absent on that day, again, there should be an electronic system that whoever is at the facility that day can access. And that would help to resolve the issues that we're seeing. So the third area had to do with actually just entering the facilities. Our finding here was that the ease of entry into the facilities, which also includes clearances and how that data is managed, it varies widely. So for example, some individuals did highlight, for example, Camp Kilpatrick and said there's really smooth communication in place. Even when there are staff changes, there's a smooth protocol in place. Others, however, shared that they might be stuck at the door for up to an hour waiting to get cleared to come in. They also mentioned that there are inconsistencies across facilities with regards to what you can bring in. So for example, if a program, requires some sort of technology to run their program, at one facility, they're able to bring it in. At another facility that they're cleared at, they might not be able to bring it in. So we're posing 3 very straightforward recommendations here, and I'll read the first 2. Really highlighting that at places like Camp Kilpatrick and Barry J, there seem to be some steps they're taking there that are working because people say the communication has been smooth. So let's replicate that. If there are things that they're doing well, let's figure out how to replicate those practices at other facilities. And along with that, there should be uniform standards and clearances for the use of technology across all facilities. So if it's going to be allowed at one, it should be allowed at all. Whatever the expectations are, they should be communicated to all providers so that people aren't showing up the day of and then finding out they can't bring in what they need to. I will next move to the issue of cancellations. So schedules, probation initiated cancellations, and engaging youth. Program providers at all facilities reported issues with probation initiated cancellations and receiving notification that their program had been canceled after they'd already arrived to the site. And so, I'll say that the CBOs were very understanding that cancellations will happen, that things are often happening on site that are, outside of anyone's control. And they really highlighted that they know that there are stressors going on. And sometimes it's going to happen that they'll show up and maybe the program is going to get canceled. However, it was brought up by many people that it was a barrier to providing services. Sometimes maybe you make it through the facility, but then you get to the unit and that's when you find out your program had been canceled that day. Others talked about sometimes they're held at the door because another program is running. And so they're told, well, you can't go back there yet because another program is running. And I think because there is no working calendar, it's really hard to understand where your program fits into the flow of other programming happening. Folks also mentioned that it's challenging sometimes because they might show up and then staff tells them, well, no one wants to participate today. And they're not able to just engage the youth on their own to say, hey, do you want to participate today? So there's kind of like they have to go through a bit of a gatekeeper. So the 3 recommendations that I'll highlight here is one, just if a cancellation is going to happen, just trying to provide reasonable advance notice, if at all possible. But let's say someone shows up and their program was canceled at a particular unit. Steps should be taken to discuss, is there another unit where we could offer our program today? We're here, we showed up. As long as there's no safety concerns, can the program be offered somewhere else at the facility? And then programs really feel like they should be able to engage youth into their program as long as it's safe to do so. So we should have a right to ask youth, do they want to participate for the day? Okay, and the last broad area is culture and staffing. And the main finding here was that, it feels like the department really relies on the will of individual employees to set the tone on how CBO partners are engaged and how services are approached. So some reported having really strong relationships with probation staff, with unit staff, and then others just said it varied wildly depending on the facility, depending on the unit. And in particular, some felt that their staff members might get treated differently if they have a non-conventional appearance. And so, people express some frustration, saying they kind of feel like there's just a lack of buy-in from staff, not all staff, but at times with the programming. Programming is seen almost as like a reward. Well, like if a youth has behaved well, then they can get the program. Others explained that they're kind of constantly having to rebuild relationships with staff every time they show up. So it doesn't feel like a partnership because, they might show up and the staff doesn't know that they were supposed to be there. Who are you? Why are you here? And so again, it creates that barrier to services happening. And so one recommendation I'll highlight here, knowing that culture change takes a very long time, but at the bare minimum, probation leadership should clearly communicate the stance towards programming and emphasize that there is a belief that programming supports rehabilitation, that programming is centered in models of care and healing, and that really has to be a priority, and that messaging really needs to start with probation leadership. And staff should also know who's coming in the door. So I can imagine that being very frustrating for a staff, not knowing who's showing up and having to respond to that. But if there was a calendar there, people would show up and they would kind of know who to expect and what to expect on the unit that day. So we will be publishing these findings and or these recommendations, and you can kind of read them in detail, but those are, just a few that we thought would be important to share tonight. And I think we can go to the next slide. Okay. So just to share our immediate next steps after tonight, our ad hoc committee will be meeting with Deputy Chief Epps to talk about these recommendations and to get some commitments from the department on the recommendations that we're posing, and to see how feasible it is for them to be implemented and what the timeline would be. We are also hoping to engage probation staff, because unit staff in particular are the ones who are interacting often with the providers, and I think it's important that their perspectives are shared as well. And then today, getting your public input is very important to us as well. And on the next slide, you'll see that there are a couple questions that we are posing just to generate some conversation tonight. So the first would be, are there any recommendations or key issues that we missed? Something that's really not on our radar that wasn't mentioned tonight that you think might help to address some of the challenges? Which of the recommendations should be prioritized? I think it would be great if all 18 could immediately be adopted, but it would be interesting to know from you all which are those that are critical and absolutely need to be pushed. Are there other conditions or supports your programs need to be even better? So again, something that we haven't mentioned tonight that you think would help you all to just, operate on the level you'd like to within the facilities. And then last, do you have any suggestions for how CBOs and unit staff can work together more effectively? So those are some questions we're posing tonight, hoping to hear back from everyone. And then I did want to give Commissioner Kakani an opportunity. If there's anything else you want to highlight from the findings or recommendations, feel free.
I've got nothing to add. I think you did a great job of summing up what we heard.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. And we'll now open the floor to our attendees to raise any questions or concerns. And Sarah, if you could please facilitate public comment for us, please.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, commissioners. Okay, so just as a reminder, I did see one hand go up right now, but for everyone else, to make a comment or ask a question, you must either be logged into WebEx or phoned into our meeting. If you want to provide public comment, please raise your hand by tapping the hand icon and we'll put you in the queue. If you have called in, please press *3 to get in queue. We'll then unmute you when it's your turn so you can ask your question. And again, if your question is for a specific panelist, please feel free to state that and know that you can always still send us that email at info@poc.lacounty.gov. Please don't send any public comments in the chat because we're not able to respond there. If you have any technical questions or can't find the hand icon, please send a chat to the host. And I am going to pop those questions in the chat right now. And then I see one hand up. So if we want to start with, just 1 second. I just lost it when I grabbed the chat. I see Laura Gonzalez. If you want to unmute and make a comment.
So my name is Laura Gonzalez. I've been a social worker out in the Antelope Valley for approximately 17 years. I worked human trafficking, kids, adults, all of it. And what I saw and what I found to be the most frustrating was when we look at the Maslow's hierarchy of needs and we're talking about just personal needs, we're seeing that all of their basic human needs are not addressed. So therefore, since they're not addressed, we're gonna then, it's like asking a child to understand grief when adults can't do it, if that makes sense, right? So one of the things is I love the support that everyone is providing our youngins, right? And that's great. We need that. However, as you stated, who's going to be there for our CBOs to provide the same level of training for them to understand that this is what they experience. This is what they have going on. And it's sometimes they need to go into their world too mentally and understand that. And let me explain. So when I used to educate teachers, right? Teacher would be, oh, their math homework isn't done. And I'm like, right. But when they go home, they have no light, no internet, no food. What is your math homework going to do for them? Nothing. So we're not providing that basic level of support. We're putting a band-aid on a gash. That's not going to help. So what I'm proposing is I run groups myself with people trying to learn how to understand where people are coming from. And I think that's something CBOs need to go through, is that personal training to understand where they're coming from. Because I think sometimes we forget, right? We forget we might have come from it and we wanted to be helping, and then we kind of got jaded a little bit and we forget. So I think we need a reminder constantly. And I think that's something that's lacking a lot.
Thank you for your comment, Laura.
You're welcome.
I see another hand up. Ellen Eigenberg, you want to unmute?
Thank you for doing this. I've been coming to the POC meetings for a while now, and I'm acutely aware of the lack of programming in the facilities, which is just so disheartening to me. And the thing that's been really one of many things that's been glaring is even like last POC meeting when folks were talking about the supervisors, we're talking about, just the friction that's happening between outside organizations coming in, trying to come in, and the supervisors feeling what felt like to me, it appeared territorial, for lack of better words on this. And I understand all of this is super complicated and everyone is trying to do the best they can. And the situation is just so intense and lack of staffing and all of that. But to get the unit staff to be able to work with the CBOs on both sides so that we can best serve these youth. Because the thought of them sitting there day in and day out now for a year that I'm aware of with no programming, these are teenagers, and we've been given the duty to take care of them. And it just feels, it's so disheartening and heartbreaking that they are sitting there maybe with an MP3 player, and that a lot of times is considered programming. So I would think really finding ways to get CBOs and unit staff to work together. And then also getting, it sounds like having protocol the same at all of the different facilities would really help move things in a positive way. Thank you. I appreciate all this evening and all that you are doing on the POC.
Thank you, and thank you for your comment and for being here with us.
I guess in response to that, I mean, it does seem like there's not consistent space for CBOs and unit staff, for example, to really kind of talk about the goals of the programming, or what the provider is really trying to accomplish in that space. And I can imagine it's stressful to be trying to explain your program in that moment, also engage youth, also kind of wondering what your setup would be for that day. And then I can imagine that being stressful for the staff as well, trying to negotiate all of that in a couple of minutes and then launch a successful program. It does seem like there needs to be some consistent space for folks to be able to talk about the goals of the program itself.
Okay, we've got another hand up. Sir, you can unmute.
It was a great question. And I wonder, do the probation and CBOs have a space, a time where they talk about the long-term goal of phasing out this sort of prison industrial complex and fully funding YJR and giving the probation officers a new position, because our goal is from 2020 that we won't have these halls. We won't have, it's going to be different, right? And so I just wonder, do the CBOs and the probation officers ever talk about, particularly now with Los Padrinos being found unsuitable and having 60 days, do they talk about like the beautiful Freedom Day that, that we imagine, reimagine Los Angeles? That would be some good conversations. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for being here with us. I see another hand. Call-in user 323304.
Hi, this is Alita Ledesma with the Arts for Healing and Justice Network. I just want to thank the Commission for, one, sort of listening to the CBOs and putting together the recommendation. I think at the heels of what Sir just shared, I think I am also curious in terms of the role of the new Department of Youth Development in terms of potentially instituting some of these recommendations. I think what's been challenging is that a lot of these issues that have been happening in terms of programming are systemic. We've been hearing that a lot of the challenges are because of lack of staff, not enough staff falling out. And so wondering if there's opportunities for the new department to begin to support or oversee some of the programmatic aspects to help institute some system management, calendars, all of the things that we've been sort of having issues with currently. But really appreciate the Commission sort of listening to the CBOs again and putting together the list of recommendations. But again, there's a feeling of a lot of the challenges raised are systemic, and so I'm curious sort of what that could look like Fixer said in terms of the Youth Justice Reimagined vision. Thank you.
Thank you, Alita.
I thank you so much for that reminder also. As you were sharing these kind of like goals and recommendations, something so like and the call for consistency. It's funny to me that the probation department on their website doesn't even have like a link to be like, if you want to provide programming, or like, these are the steps, these are the things you need. Like, it should be very publicly accessible. And I know that there was a board motion not that long ago really calling on DYD to handle the majority of the programming, whether it was like the contracting, the like monitoring, all the things. And because it has been such a challenge at LP, and because um, I'm not really sure like where the staffing gaps are, and if the lack of staffing impacts not even just the like going inside the facilities, but also like the clearance process, just all of the like logistical pieces. I wonder like what it would look like for DYD to fully hold that, or to more meaningfully hold it. And I think that DYD is a department that, was really like created by community and does feel much more accountable to community. And perhaps that would allow for a little bit more transparency. So perhaps incorporating DYD or connecting with DYD as a next step, and getting a better sense of what pieces they might be able to hold in this would be valuable.
Yeah, I think along with that, when we first got together as an ad hoc committee, if you recall, I had mentioned earlier is that one of our goals was to understand what was the department's long-term vision towards programming. And I think a lot of what you all are naming is what we were also hoping to address, which are those systemic issues. And I think some of the just kind of core foundational steps to getting into the facilities and just getting a calendar. And, I think we realized, okay, we need to pause and just start at the very beginning, because, the concerns that people were raising with even just being able to get clearance felt like it warranted probably much more attention than we had thought it needed. So I'm excited that these recommendations can get out there, and we can get movement on that, because I do think the next step then is really thinking about those long-term visionary things that were mentioned.
Okay, I'm looking for other hands. I don't see any hands up. Do we want to give a few seconds and see if anyone else wants to add anything before we end our town hall? Going once. Oh, okay. Laura, go ahead and unmute. I think, yeah.
Yes,
there
hi,
you go.
I'm so sorry. I just wanted to get the email address again to send.
Oh, yeah, sure. So that's info@poc.lacounty.gov.
County.gov.
Mhm.
Perfect, thank you. And then is it attention to a specific person or no? It doesn't matter.
Not necessarily. If you just want to write in with something, if you, I know that around the time of our public meetings, if you would like something to be attached for our public meetings, you can indicate that. Otherwise, you can send a general email.
Okay.
And we'll do what we can to get back to you. If there's a specific question that we can answer, we certainly will.
Perfect, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, I see someone else put their hand up. Esther?
Piggybacking off of a comment that was made by one of the earlier commenters, could you give clarification? The order that came out on October 14th saying that the facility has to be empty by December 12th, is that a fait accompli? Is that what's going to happen? Or is that like a suggestion that's been made?
I'm happy to respond to, I don't know if it, yeah, I mean, it's a little bit outside of the scope here, but so the Board of State and Community Corrections, right? It's a state body that inspects, both sets the standards for all of our juvenile and state carceral facilities, and then inspects those facilities to ensure, right, that those minimum standards are being met. LA has been under kind of additional supervision because we have been really more so out of compliance with far too many, or not even far too many, but for some quite like substantial issues related to staffing, programming, recreational time, things of that nature. And so on October, I want to say 11th or 12th, the probation department submitted what's called a corrective action plan, basically a plan to address the fact that LA was out of compliance with staffing, right? Like within between call outs and between, I don't know what it is, but just not enough folks are showing up to work at Los Padrinos, right? And so on October 14th, the Board of State and Community Corrections issued a letter that quotes the Welfare and Institutions Code, which states that the county has 60 days to either close the facility because it is not suitable for the confinement of youth, or to really magically figure out how to figure out their staffing issue. And again, that would require the BSCC being willing to come back down to LA within that 60 days to inspect the facility and ensure that staffing was in fact meeting those minimum standards. The BSCC, the Board of State and Community Corrections, they don't have the like legal authority or the power to necessarily come and take the keys away from probation and force those kids to go somewhere else. It is kind of like almost an honor code type thing. Like, is it really fair and just to keep kids in facilities that are unsuitable for their confinement? So it's really unclear. I mean, there was a statement by the probation department that didn't really acknowledge the fact that they may not be back into compliance. It was just that they had every intention of coming back into compliance. Not really a ton of specificity around their plan. You know, they mentioned some of the things that they've been using, like training, hiring, overtime, deploying field staff, but they've been doing that since February of this year, and I don't know that it's really resulted in significant like long-term changes. So to your question, it's not really clear how the county or the department is going to move come December 14th. And what, you know, I mean, we've heard the county on several moments saying that they are throwing all of their resources behind probation. So it's hard to know what's going to happen or like what is going to occur on December 14th. But hopefully through the Probation Oversight Commission meetings, we can kind of try to get some more transparency around what the county's plan is and what probation's plan is, because what the BSCC said was that there really was no specificity in probation's plan or significant specificity or significant urgency, right, in some of the ways that they were moving that would allow it, you know, to meet those minimum standards. I hope that made some sense.
Thank you for that, Commissioner. Do we have any other participants or anybody else who wants to make a public comment? Okay. And I just really want to thank every single one of you for being here tonight. As we come to an end, I want to encourage you all to please keep talking to each other and to us about programming, and to plug our next commission meeting, which is on Thursday, November 14th at Magic Johnson Park at 9 a.m. You can find registration details for that on the POC website at poc.lacounty.gov/meetings. Thanks everyone for listening in, and have a great evening. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.